Well, today it's down to Xavier versus Azah to determine who will choose the history that is apparently occurring today. That history that they've been making a big deal out of the entire season, that history that justified the racist gameplay and cheering for the racist gameplay by Big Brother fans, Big Brother alumni, most Big Brother podcasters, and even Big Brother production, which was represented by Chen when she defended and supported this racist alliance. But, despite history being made, per usual, people still aren't satisfied. The ones who've been cheerleading this bullshit all season. In fact, if you go over on Twitter and you type in that magical word, COON, or hell, if you just type in Xavier's name, and it's still filled with people referring to him by a racial slur. Yes, it's that word coon. And a lot of times, the people who are stating this are Tiffany fans. How do you realize that? Well, some of them have Tiffany a part of their name because they're advertising for her to be rewarded with AFP. Much like how Devon got rewarded with AFP for being a loudmouth who, racially slurred a fellow house guest. Now, Tiffany didn't quite racially slur anyone of the cookout, but, she did casually mention uh, the whiteys in her life, which I'm sure if someone mentioned the blackies in their lives, they would have called hell for it. But, this season, it got cheered on. And this season, the cookouts, the cookout mentality, and the cookout fans, it's a great reflection of real life when you think about it. Because right now, Azah and Xavier, they have a Big Brother life game versus a Big Brother house game decision to make. And they're deciding on whether or not they should take the person that they personally want to take, which I do feel is each other since they've been cuddling and talking, and Derek F has been desperate seeing this, and he's gotten so desperate to the point where he's now bringing up his family and bills that need to be paid. But then there's the Big Brother house game decision. What's actually best for the game? And so far this season, it really hasn't been based on the game very much. They've been in the house game playing the life game based on the fact that they are worrying about Twitter. Specifically Black Twitter, which Azah has mentioned personally herself. But as I said before, the cookout fans, the cookout mentality, and the cookout alliance is really a reflection of real life because despite being at the doorstep of making this so-called history that they've been talking about, they aren't satisfied with the ones who were there. I mean, throughout the season, many people have insulted Derek F, especially when he got into conflict with Tiffany, calling him misogynistic, calling him a coon. People have been upset with Azah because she had a negative relationship with Tiffany and calling her all sorts of names, one among them calling her stupid. because they rather have someone like Tiffany be a winner that represents instead of someone like Azah who actually comes from a family that's affiliated with royalty. A Cameroonian. You know, motherfuckers always talk about Wakanda and Wakanda forever, where you have the closest person to it, that's representing that imaginary world, but in real life, with Azah, but they have been dissatisfied with her this entire season. And then, of course, there's X. And, they've just been slurring him the entire season. Ever since they saw him getting close with people like Whitney, they've been questioning him and slurring him. And then recently they showed the white half of his family. And, you know, they just picked up the intensity of all of the slurs. Even though they love Barack Obama, who was raised by his white family, and they love Colin Kaepernick, who's half white himself, just like Obama, and he was raised by his white family. But again, it's that sort of shameless hypocrisy of the people that are fans of the cookout, the shameless hypocrisy of the people that are in the cookout, and that cookout mentality is shamelessly hypocritical. And so it makes this season not just the most racist season ever, but a pure reflection of the chaotic nature that goes along with something like the cookout. Because first of all, it's a situation where you're never satisfied, and the only people that are worthy to represent anything, they either have to be degenerates, they either have to be uh, loud mouths, or they have to be the right type of female or male that represents every fucking stereotype under the sun. Meanwhile, we have to hear these same type of people claim how much they're against racism and they're against oppression, even though everybody that they root for represents that type of oppression and racism they claim to be against. I mean, we've seen that with this whole mandate situation, right? The people who usually call out things like the Tuskegee experiment and reference that as a moment of racism through the medical field, or they'll point to Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were used to cure a lot of diseases, but when she visited a doctor, she was stricken with cancer, and they say, oh, they gave her cancer so they could take her cells. Racism. But these are now the same people who will shout down people like Nicki Minaj questioning shit, or Kyrie Irving in the NBA questioning shit. When usually that would be a perfect opportunity to be like, oh, we're against oppression and racism. These mandates are oppressive and racist. And then, calling someone like Joe Biden Uncle Joe, despite him saying, quote, if Haiti sunk into the Caribbean, it wouldn't matter. But then you cut to, oh, we're so offended by the racist Border Patrol hitting Haitians with whips. But, I voted for somebody that said racist shit about Haitians. Like, all of that shameless hypocrisy that goes on in real life, it went on through Big Brother with this cookout game bullshit. And so it makes sense why the two parallel so perfectly. And then you have their white liberal advocates, just like in real life, bad mouthing the ones that they deem inappropriate to represent history. You had little Miss Daisy Melissa, running at the mouth, saying that if one of their win wouldn't count, their win would be invalid. And then recently you had fucking Taran just torpedo his reputation, you know, talking about how Xavier and uh, Derek F dared, downplay Tiffany's game because they talk about how much of a bad player she was. Well, if anybody was watching the game, especially for people who were playing the game, but if people were watching the game, then of course Tiffany was a shit player because they highlighted the fact that she had her little confrontational attitude, which would have got her targeted if she didn't have the cookout as allies. And you don't need to look no further than when Sarah Beth won HOH and had the opportunity to know all the shit Tiffany's been saying about her. But that was kept secret by Kylan because he was in this racist allegiance with her. But if Kylan didn't have that incentive, based on, the bullshit allegiance he put on himself, Sarah Beth would have known that information and thus would have targeted Tiffany. And Tiffany non-winning comp ass, unless it's thrown to her, wouldn't have won that veto and she would have been evicted. Plus, by then, Hannah would have already been gone. So who knows if Hannah would have went pre-jury the way she should have when Christian won HOH and Xavier had the information to pretty much cement her being targeted. If she was gone pre-jury, Tiffany probably would have been gone even earlier, than before SB1. So yes, if it wasn't for the cookout men, especially people like Xavier and Kylan, then their little slay queen would have been gone far, far earlier. But again, this shit gets uh, ignored by people like Melissa, by people like Taran, because they represent, the white liberals who advocate for the degeneracy, the degenerate representatives of the so-called community. And they cheerlead that type on. And they will cheerlead them above people who are far more qualified. And why do they do that? Because they are enablers of the degenerate shit. They are enablers of the chaos mentality that operates behind this whole cookout shit. Because again, all this whole cookout shit, it represents the BLM thing. Where you have money hustlers hustling the race issue, having $1 million homes, having happy relationships with their white lovers, despite saying all types of anti-white bullshit. Having $1 million homes in mostly white neighborhoods. The cookout represents the George Floyd thing. The dude that held a gun at a black pregnant woman's belly. Career criminal that then got killed by a police officer, and now they have these morons celebrating his death and his birthday. Taran and Melissa represent the type of white liberals that want to celebrate that because they like to pedestal degenerate bullshit. And that's what this cookout thing represents. Degenerate bullshit. We didn't even get a real fucking game this season because they bowed down to this degenerate bullshit. But there is a final game decision to be had. Are they going to make the big brother life game decision or the Big Brother house game decision? Because Azah has actually been thinking about taking Xavier. I mean, I guess it's been all those cuddles that's been going on lately. And hell, it could be strategic on Xavier's part. But again, that's assuming he's really playing the game. And, even if one of them wins, when they get out and see Twitter, especially if Xavier wins, and see Twitter and reacts to what they've been saying about him, how is he going to feel about making history when he sees that he's been the most racially slurred and it hasn't been by people he would stereotypically assume was racially slurring him? The sad thing though is, even when he sees how all these people have been talking about him, they're still going to pretend to celebrate him because they still want to be able to hold on to that moniker of first black winner, history being made. Even though you had someone refer to the Big Brother Canadian winner who apparently was a black dude, and it was like, oh, Canada got that dude, but we get Xavier, who is a coon. Despite all that, they're still going to hang on to that first black winner because it's a name brand. And, these woke liberal Negroes, they love name brands. And so they're going to hang on to that name brand, and champion that if he wins, at least most of them, some will still be dedicated to slurring him. They're going to do that shameless, hypocritical bullshit because, again, that's what this cookout thing represents. And Xavier is going to see what they've been saying about him. But is he going to address it? No. Because super simps and panderers like him don't ever address anything real. They just like to perpetuate the messages that are imaginary. Like how he needs to win the game through making this all black alliance, even though his family doesn't represent that and his daily life doesn't represent that. But that's why if Xavier wins, if Azah wins, if Derek F wins, even if the fans who are watching this don't want them to win, they still represent the degenerate bullshit that is the cookout. Because they're willing to ignore what's been going on and what's been happening, which has been the utter disrespect towards them and the disrespect bullshit that they engaged in this entire season. But, Azah and Xavier, or Azah or Xavier, had the opportunity to play the game one last time and pick the right person to go to the end with, so one of them could at the very least guarantee that they have 750K. And that decision is to take Derek F. And Derek F knows that that's the decision. Despite him practicing all of his speeches where he thinks he's going to be able to convince people that he won. So, looking forward to finding out the results. Because I don't think I'm going to watch much of the episode. Pretty disgusted with this season. But again, with this season, it's been a perfect parallel with how all of the woke circles operate in real life. And Survivor, oh, that's just been another example of bullshit. But this isn't a Survivor video. This is a Big Brother video. But with Big Brother, we'll see who wins this final competition in a few hours. P.S. This is history being celebrated right here, as you can see on Twitter. Bunch of people calling Xavier coon, wishing their first black winner wasn't someone that was a coon and misogynist. People making fun of his family, talking about I told y'all about this coon. But these are the same people that are fans of Kaepernick and Obama, like I stated, and BLM, which is very heavily influenced by swirlers. I mean, again, another person who stated he was given coon energy has BLM in their Twitter bio, and it looks like they are a fan. They're a fan of K-pop because I believe Jimin is a K-pop artist. This bitch would be called coon or trying to act white for liking this shit. So if she's in any neighborhoods that I'm familiar with and she's a fan of this K-pop shit, she's more than likely in the closet about that. Because you would get fried, you would get joned on if you were fans of particular shit that people deemed not black. But yeah, again, calling people coon, but she's a fan of K-pop and has BLM in her Twitter bio. And then this person saying coon behavior because Derek F. and Xavier dared talk about Frenchie possibly being in Final Three. Meanwhile, they've been having wet dreams about what if Hannah and Tiffany brought Derek X and Claire with them. Again, like I said, shameless hypocrisy reflected in this game and in real life.